For Sauron himself was filled with great fear at the wrath of the Valar, and the doom that Eru laid upon the sea and land. It was greater far than aught he had looked for, hoping only for the death of the Númenorians and the defeat of their proud king. And Sauron, sitting in his black seat in the midst of the temple, had laughed when he heard the trumpets of Ar-Pharazôn sounding for battle, and again he had laughed when he heard the thunder of the storm. And a third time, even as he laughed at his own thought, thinking what he would do now in the world being rid of the Edain forever, he was taken in the midst of his mirth, and his seat and his temple fell into the abyss. But Sauron was not of mortal flesh, and though he was robbed now of that shape in which he had wrought so great an evil, so he could never again appear fair to the eyes of men. Yet his spirit arose out of the deep and passed as a shadow and a black wind over the sea, and came back to Middle-earth and to Mordor, that was his home. There he took up again his great ring in Barad-dûr, and dwelt there, dark and silent, until he wrought himself a new guise, an image of malice and hatred made visible, and the eye of Sauron, the terrible, few could endure.
Hey guys, it's Lady B here. Let's get everyone on. We have High King Feanor and Gadfly today. No man of Manetheren, Nathan, is with his family today. Hello everyone, and welcome to Silmarillion book stream. If you're watching us live, that's awesome. I hope you're doing well. If you're joining us for a rewatch, also welcome and thank you for coming. How is everyone today?
Yeah, doing all right.
Doing okay. Yeah. Hanging in there.
Yeah, so I had a little fun, like a little wee bit of trolling for this intro, because it says at the end of this our chapter today, the Akallabêth, that Sauron took a, like, what did it say, like the worst form he could think of.
I was about to ask some serious questions. We were about to have a different chat as to why that abomination showed up on screen.
No, here's the quote. Just so you know what I was getting at, the quote is until there he took up again his great ring in Barad-dûr and dwelt there, dark and silent, until he wrought himself a new guise, an image of malice and hatred made visible. I couldn't think of anything more malicious and hatred-filled than that. So I hate Rings of Power, and reading this made me hate it even more. But like, that was like the worst form I could think of he could take. So like, yeah.
Poor Jacob in the chat is having an aneurysm right now.
Oh, Jacob, I'm sorry. Because it's awful. It's hatred and malice.
It's very important to recognize evil when you see it.
Right.
And Rings of Power is evil.
I just love how it starts off. He starts off just saying, "Oh, hey, hi guys, how's it going? Whatever, you know." And it's like, "Oh no, why?"
I know, like, hello, Finway. I'm sorry to give you guys that, but I always, have to troll sometimes, like,
right.
And yeah, so it's weird. It's weird at being done with the Silmarillion proper now, and we're in the Akallabêth. So, okay, I have some questions about this, and I hope you guys can help me out.
Okay.
Now, I know that, like, the Silmarillion basically goes in, like, there's a chronological order of this. And when I was reading this, I had some questions about it, because they mentioned, like, the One Ring and some other things that had happened, and Sauron's war with the elves. And I was like, where does this fit in the chronology of, like, everything?
So the beginning of the Akallabêth kind of explains that, because this is taking up almost immediately after the end of the Silmarillion and that epic struggle there, because it's the children of Arendelle, right? It goes through that Elros and Elrond.
Mhm.
So Elros, after the war against Melkor is finished and he's cast into the eternal darkness,
Mhm.
Elros takes the faithful men,
Yeah.
and they go to that gift, the gifted land that was gifted to them for being faithful, whereas the other men remain under the sway of Sauron and the other forces of darkness.
Mhm.
So this almost immediately precedes that, or follows after that, right? So it's just a continuation.
Okay. So I feel like this is like in the meantime thing, kind of like the creation of the rings and stuff like this sort of.
Well, that stuff's going on
Yeah.
during, because this period lasts like 2,000 years or something like that, with the 24 kings.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know. Oh, I see it. Okay. So yeah, so I'm assuming that there'll be more information about this in the next chapter, which we'll cover probably the first week of January. The Rings of Power.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, almost like we had originally thought about doing those two chapters together, but there's a lot of information in them and obviously a lot of stuff to go on. So yeah, so the Akallabêth is really interesting, I thought, because it kind of takes a deviation from the kind of epic scale and it goes on to a more concise history, and it focuses solely on men here. And it starts off kind of where we left off with the War of Wrath and stuff like that. And we've got men, and they're talking about a lot of humans and how they are and how they're more susceptible to more and the seeds of evil seem to sprout more in them than in, say, like the elves and stuff like that. And they talk about how the elves have returned to the west and they establish a city called Avalon. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, well, you see the little umlauts at the top of the E.
Avalone.
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 Yep.
Okay. And it's the city that's closest to Valinor. So, and then they talk about how Númenor got started. Now, Númenor was created by the Valar for the 3 faithful houses of men as a reward, and they were given wisdom, power, long life, and an island, star-shaped island. Now, I never got that it was star-shaped, other than they called it a star. I thought that was kind of interesting, but because they said that the men found this by following the star of Arendil into to their new land, and they called it. They had a whole bunch of names, but it's what we would recognize as Númenor, and the men were called Dunedain, kings among men, and they were given also long life, but they're still mortal. Yeah, this is really important.
And also great stature too.
Oh yeah, they're very
tall. Yeah.
Uh-oh. I mean, I'm feeling some Atlantis vibes from this.
Yeah. So it's it starts off with the Númenorians traveling eastward back to Middle Earth to free the other men there from the thraldom of darkness, right?
Yeah.
And those men consider the Númenorians to be gods.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, so that happens after they get established in Númenor, and they the Valar kind of gift them with like good weather and good sailing conditions and everything they need basically to flourish. It's a very Edenic society, I guess you could say. And so and we should also note that the first king of Númenor was Elros, and Elros was the son of Arendil, and his brother was Elrond, and so I think they're both half elf, right?
Yeah.
Yep. One chose to be a part of the judged as one of the elves. That would be Elrond, and then Elros wanted to be judged as man. Yep.
Yeah. So I think what
the other thing to note here is that they make it very clear in this chapter that this line of men from Elros have the blood of the Eldar in them, the blood of the men in them, and the blood of the Maiar in them.
Yes, yes,
Because
that's
they
very
are descendants of Melian.
Melian,
Yep.
yeah, Melian.
So
Oh yeah, that's crazy. I know that's kind of cool when I was reading it because it really seems like I always got that there's like kind of there's a gap between like men and elves, and I think in this story it really kind of hits that home.
When you go to Lord of the Rings after this, and you hear about how the hobbits like Frodo and Sam and Merry and Pippin look at Aragorn, and they see this grand nobleness within him, even though he has this rough exterior. But then also later on, when Pippin is taken to Gondor, and he meets Denethor, and also later with Frodo and Sam meeting Faramir, they both see that same nobleness within that line of men, but diminished compared to Aragorn. So even those 1,000-odd years after the fall of Númenor, the line of the men of Númenor still holds that weight of majesty within it.
I know. I thought that's really interesting because there's a lot of like backstory for Lord of the Rings in this. So it's like you got characters that are in it, or that we hear about. So you have like Elrond, Isildur,
Elendil,
Elendil, yeah, and a lot of the Aragorn backstory. So that was kind of fun reading this, and then you realize, okay, this is where he came from, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and then you also realize that Arwen is Aragorn's great aunt.
Okay, I knew that.
Yeah, it's true.
It's like so far removed that it's
Don't worry, they're not like second cousins, which becomes
it's inconsequential.
The story.
Yeah, it's one of those things that people point out to be edgy and cool, and the real cool people point and be like, yeah, but my potential spouse, whatever, we both go back to Charlemagne, so right. It's like, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, it doesn't, but it is kind of funny. But welcome, Maximus. Númenor is the real Atlantis. Plato just got a very poorly translated version of the Red Book. That's funny.
It's not Atlantis. It's Atalantea.
Atalantia? Or Tia?
Tea.
Okay.
Or Atalanta. Atalante, if I'm remembering the spelling correctly.
Okay, that's awesome. So, So it's interesting kind of that these like men that are Númenor have the protection of the Valar, which I don't think any other group of men had that in the past, did they?
No.
Individual men did, but not like whole civilizations of them.
Not as directly.
True.
Because the Valar always were kind of observing and looking over things and making sure stuff didn't get too out of hand.
Right.
Which is why they decided to go to war against Melkor, because stuff was getting out of hand.
Yeah, we have a bunch of people here that I've not seen. I want to say hi to Cam and Eraserhead. Hello there. We've been covering the Silmarillion for this is our 6th reading of it. We're almost done. I recently, just to give you a quick backstory, I recently read Lord of the Rings for the first time and wanted to keep going, and so it has definitely been a roller coaster ride of emotions. Like the last 2 book clubs were hard to get through, but we got John Thomas there too. Like, nice to see you guys, and do me a favor and hit that like button and tell your friends. So this is another one where there's like a lot of chapters or a lot of history. And I was going to ask you guys, because I was talking to Will about this and he was telling me some other stuff, and a lot of this is expounded later on in like the history of Middle Earth. Mm-hmm. And since you guys know a lot more about this than me, just the first time reader here, what do you guys do you have any comments on the history part of it, or
aside from like the clear biblical imagery and parallels within it, we have the Tower of Babel in here with the pride of a king and trying to establish himself as superior to God, right?
Mm-hmm.
We also have the flood in here of the erasing of the evilness of man, but in a smaller portion here. But also just the the display of the kings and their actions, and if you're going through the Book of Kings or Chronicles in within the Bible, it's it starts off as good king, not so good king, less good king, bad king, and then you get these sort of good kings coming up later on, right? But of course, this is only 24 kings in this chunk because they all live for centuries, right?
yeah, that's pretty crazy. As he said, there was something like 500 years about.
Well, when one of them died when he was 200, he was accounted to have been like at his prime. So it's like,
Yeah, absolutely. That is pretty wild. And I guess I like the historical and the biblical things. I guess I was talking to I wanted to ask you guys in terms of like the world, like Tolkien world, does like I don't know what I'm trying to say. I guess this is just a very small piece of this. There's like a lot more of this story, right?
yeah. Well, this is this chunk is building up, as we said before, the Aragorn setup. It's structuring the side of good in the War of the Ring.
I know, because my boyfriend was telling me, oh, the lots of the Númenorians are really badass, and I'm like, I don't know.
Well, they are. So we'll get into it further, but I mean, if you look in totality at the history of Númenor, I mean, they have how many? I want to say it's 2 separate wars with Sauron. One where they actually both times the Númenorians came in and just not vanquished him, but sufficiently humbled him.
Yeah. So yeah, the Númenorians have multiple excursions to the east. And it starts off as this beneficial thing of teaching and instructing and protecting, right? So they're setting up the cradles of civilization within the west, within the east, sorry. And then it moves on to them taking tribute, and then it goes on to them conquering them.
Yeah,
I thought that was really interesting.
So there's a chunk of history where you have the Black Númenorians, and they're called the Black Númenorians because they are the holdover of that cult of
Sauron.
Well, it's more the cult of Morgoth, right? But
yeah.
And so, but they survive the destruction of Númenor because they're set up in these little colonies.
Yeah.
But they're still doing stuff like human sacrifice and
okay. So
that,
okay. Yeah, right? I guess that's what I'm getting is like this part, and I don't even know. It could be maybe just my edition of the book. It's just it seemed like there's a lot more that I didn't read in my edition because mine edition was only like 50 pages for the story.
Yeah. Well, it's the story of the island of Númenor, right? And more specifically of the line of Elros, and that that comes to a near end. But very importantly, it also highlights the mercy of the Valar or Eru towards that line by preserving Isildur and
the faithful.
And that's
Okay.
small, the 9 ships, right?
Yeah, okay. I just had to make sure because I was kind of confused about like, okay, there's definitely some stuff that I haven't read yet or in other things. That's basically just what I was trying to get at. And I'm like totally getting ahead of my notes here, but yeah, so the humans were given Númenor as a gift for their faithfulness. It was 3 main families, and then the people that ended up ruling it were the descendants of Elros, who chose the human path to or human life. And I forgot one very important thing. So they were not allowed to go to Avalon
Yeah.
or like
They were not to sail
Valinor or sail
westward
past
farther than they would be able to look back and see Númenor.
Yeah, so they couldn't go there. And I thought this was really interesting. It was kind of a thread that goes through the whole section of this. And they were very concerned about if they did do that, then like the men would become very like covetous of the immortality of the elves.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really fascinated throughout the whole, like, especially some of the stuff in the beginning where they were saying that they were like, they had this fear of death. And it really made me think about how in the first few chapters, it's like nobody knows what happens to men after they die, and they don't really have like a religion or something. So I was almost like thinking, is this like Tolkien's way of kind of talking about like maybe what happens like if you don't have any kind of like religious
they do have the sort of religious component where they have at the top of blanking on the name of the mountain, something.
Meneltama.
Yeah.
Meneltama,
they have this sort of shrine and place of worship specifically to Eru Ilúvatar there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then that of course gets corrupted later on in the story. But
yeah, it does.
The reasoning for the Valar in trying to keep the Númenóreans separate from Valinor is that it's supposed to be that representation of the separation between the two races, right? Mm-hmm. The elves and the men. And the men are supposed to, it's supposed to be a way for the men to acknowledge that is not our lot. Our lot is supposed to, right? It's because when we read it earlier in the Silmarillion and in the even earlier on, death is the gift to mankind, right?
Yeah, so that was something that they mentioned
to highlight that difference. But of course, this is another one of those biblical parallels where you look in the Garden of Eden, right? Like there's the one instruction.
Yeah, just don't do this one thing.
But that becomes the thing that fixates in the, well, it doesn't necessarily fixate in the mind, but it becomes the one thing that is a stumbling component for Adam and Eve. And it's the same for these people where they become so fixated on what they can't do that they no longer recognize and acknowledge the thing that is for them.
Right.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too, because like later on when they start getting a little bit like high and mighty and full of themselves, they there's a messenger sent from the Valar to talk to them about the issues that they're having. And I think they said something about like, oh, how is it that the Eldar get to live forever, and how even the kinslayers are still alive or whatever. And they're like, well, yeah, they're alive because that's their being, the essence of their being, and their life is tied to the survival of Arda. And how do you know that this eternal life isn't in itself like a punishment? I thought that was really cool,
right?
Especially considering the fates of Maedhros and what was the other guy's name?
Maglor.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I gotta be just half a second.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
Good.
So I thought that was interesting. So, we forgot the one thing, and I'll make sure we'll get Gadfly's thoughts on this too. In this big kind of section, the history section, where they don't really give a lot of names, they do talk about one of the gifts of the Eldar, and that was the seedling of Galathylion, the tree of Tuna, which was a descendant of Teleprion, which was one of the 2 trees that lit the world. And I thought that was interesting. They called the tree Nimloth. And That's really interesting because I think we all remember, like, we've seen the end of Lord of the Rings
Oh,
and
yeah.
like the
Yep.
tree in there, and then it like comes blossoming, and that of course is where this is the parent of that tree.
Yep. So, yeah, it's the tree that ends. So when Aragorn is coronated, spoiler alert. Yeah, Gandalf takes. I believe, yeah, it is Gandalf who takes him to this like secret passageway in the books, and there's a seedling of the white tree that's still there, and that one's like a descendant of Nimloth the Fair.
Yeah.
Because and Gadfly, you can correct me on this. Don't when the old white tree in Minas Tirith, the one that's a direct descendant, they end up burying that one, I believe. They don't burn it. I know that. Where she was talking about the Nimloth, how Nimloth was a gift.
I think the tree in Minas Tirith sprouts again.
I thought that Gandalf led Aragorn to and showed him a seedling, or not a seedling, but like it was like a smaller, like almost like a small.
Yeah, I kind of remember that too.
I got the Lord of the Rings right here.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain though that the tree itself, at least for a while, is
okay. Is this a different thing with the book and the movie?
Gandalf leads Aragorn to find the sapling to plant a new tree. That's what I thought.
Yeah, nerd fight. I know. I hate that.
I'm pretty certain there was something in there where it was mentioning that the roots of the tree were still alive, but I don't recall specifically where. But I'm pretty sure that the roots of the tree at Minas Tirith were still alive.
I mean,
but maybe Denethor did something.
I could have sworn that once when Aragorn became king, he had them bury the tree, gave it an honorable burial, I believe. Wow. I know this is getting off topic, but since it was brought up, I now have to know because my OCD won't permit me to.
Maximus is saying that the first white tree was burned in Minas Ithil. The seedling of that tree was planted in Minas Anor,
yep.
And that one died too, but a seedling was found, and that final one died after the death of Irnur.
Yep, and that's the tree that you see in the Lord of the Rings until Aragorn returns, becomes king, and then Gandalf shows him a seedling of that was kept. I don't know if it was kept secret or if it was just there. I don't know exactly. I can't remember how exactly it was there, but
yeah, I don't remember the background of how they found it, if it was just wild or something, but I kind of like the idea that it was like a wild sapling that just grew naturally, because it kind of like the tree represents the goodness of the people and the light of the original trees, which is showing that even despite everything that happens, like you can still find goodness in the world.
The tree is also a promise, right? Like we get a prophecy in this book that
the prophecies
that the line of Elros and the Númenorians won't be extinguished if the tree lives, right? And so the tree continuing to exist is one of those promises, right? And it's one of those things that you can look and point and be like, hey, this is another one of those clear references to that Christ-like messianic figure that will be in the future, because the tree just never dies. It never actually dies. In one way or another, it lives on, right?
I love the tree.
Hold on, I think I found it here. Then Aragorn cried, I have found it. Lo, here is the scion of the eldest of trees, but how comes it here? For it is not itself yet 7 years old. And Gandalf coming looked at it and said, verily, this is a sapling of the line of Nimloth the Fair, and that was a seedling of Galathylion, and that a fruit of Telperion of many names, eldest of trees. Who shall say how it comes here in the appointed hour? But this is in an ancient hollow, and ere the kings failed, or the tree withered in the court, a fruit must have been set here. For it is said that, though the fruit of the tree comes seldom to ripeness, yet the life within may then lie sleeping through many long years, and none can foretell the time in which it will awake. And then it says, then Aragorn laid his hand gently onto the sapling, and lo, it seemed to hold only lightly to the earth, and it was removed without hurt, and Aragorn bore it back to the citadel. Then the withered tree was uprooted, but with reverence, and they did not burn it, but laid it to rest in the silence of Rath Dinen.
Wow, so. That's sad. That's sad. I like to think the Antwives had something to do with saving this precious baby tree.
That's no, the Antwives were all exterminated. We have to remember that.
Yeah. The last few chapters were harmful enough to me. It just let me just cling to my hope of the Antwives here.
Scorched earth. Literally,
I like trees. Oh my goodness, I miss my trees like so much. It's like they have no leaves at all anymore.
I want to. I'll have to go through one of. Maybe it's one of Pippin's chapters where he looks at the tree and he thinks of the roots, but I'm pretty sure there's somewhere that says that the roots of that tree were still
bearing fruit. I think the Antwives were too busy being burned. Yeah.
They're doing their thing on OnlyFans.
OnlyFans. What good of an Antwife if she can't make a sandwich?
Yeah, but have you had the magic sap? Dude, it made like Pippin grow like 6 inches or something. Oh my goodness. Okay.
Anyway. So yes, gift, tree, Nimloth.
Yes. So I thought really interesting that as we go on, so basically we go on and it talks about more kings, and eventually they all get more power hungry, more vain, more covetous, and like you said, they went from being gifters of civilization to like wanting to take
of it.
Sunderers of it, wanting to take.
The other thing as well to mention is that there's the introduction of the fear of dying.
Yes.
You have the first king who just hangs on to life and descends into madness.
Yeah, that was on.
Essentially
I wanted
dementia.
to put that in my page numbers because I thought that was interesting, and that was on I think 226. I want to find this really fast. Yeah.
Oh, excuse me.
And it was considered deviation from custom because he held on to his kingship as well.
Yeah, I thought that was
into his
really
infirmity rather than surrendering it to his son who was coming into his full power, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Zombie Box just wanted to say hi, but yeah, I thought that was really interesting because it does talk about like the fear of death, and it kind of reminded me of how like when they're talking about Melkor, he alone of the Valar felt fear. So maybe it wasn't the fact that they died, it's just that they suddenly became afraid of dying, like how they talk about like Adam and Eve when it's like, oh, they made clothes for each other and then suddenly they realized they were naked. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a noticeable contrast from when the elves first saw mankind die, and it was a completely foreign concept to them because they were immortal. They didn't have this inclination in their mind of dying of old age, essentially.
Oh, absolutely, that too. That is really interesting.
And also seeing aged men, like seeing old men, right? Like,
Yeah, I like how they talked about how that they would just hold on to life. So it's not like it's like they became like senile, and they talked about madness and stuff too. So like maybe that was like kind of a corruption too.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so let me see. Yeah, they were trying to avoid death and they were clinging to life. And so something interesting happens when they start naming the actual kings. And there's this dude, not a nice guy, named Tar and Calamon. Am I saying that right? Tar and Calamon? And under this guy, the Númenorians split into the King's Men, who were all about the conquering and everything like that. And they were kind of turning away from the Valar and the Eldar and stuff. And then the people loyal to Númenor and they call themselves the Elendili,
Mm-hmm.
and they were loyal to the Eldar in Valar, and this is sort of marks the kind of breaking apart of Númenor. And I would think that's interesting too. It's like you kind of get the people that are like more forgetting God in this one kind of. I really felt that was like a theme in this. It was like when you turn away from faith.
It's not even necessarily just that, but it's a demonstration of how it only takes a couple generations for something to be lost or forgotten or devalued and denigrated.
Mm-hmm.
It does not take long for that to happen, because once it passes out of living memory,
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, so that's one of those elements that are running through it, right?
Yeah, and then there are other things that happens in Numenor's history. They start settling the West. I know I keep thinking like it's East.
It's the west coast of the East.
Yeah, I'm confused on that. No, they're settling Middle Earth and they're starting to build colonies and stuff. So that, like, I really got, okay, maybe they're Phoenicians or something here. And yeah, and now we're getting to the story part. And ow! Are you okay? Uh-oh. Wrath of the curse of Feanor has come. I hope not, but hopefully you're okay.
That was my old lady. I apologize. Anyway.
Okay. Hopefully you're okay. Okay. Cool.
Oh yeah, everything's good.
Okay, so we get Sauron coming into the picture. Sauron.
Well, the just before we get to that, one of the other things that crops up is this is where the sort of the death cult things up, where they start building the tombs.
Oh yeah, to
preserve flesh and stuff. So they get to a point where they can stop the dead body from corruption, decaying and stuff. But they're trying to pursue ways to
it felt very Egyptian
death,
kind
right?
of.
So there's like mummification and all that sort of stuff going on.
But they talk about the mausoleums and stuff.
Tombs building up all over the place in the mountain and across the land. So that kind of gives you an idea of just how the society had changed and become so morbid. It became surrounded and obsessed with death.
And it really plays hand in hand with what you eventually see coming from Sauron, some of which, in the history of Middle-earth you already see with the ring wraiths, with Gollum, various different examples of Sauron in his ability to essentially kind of corrupt the gift of men, being death. And you see the Númenorians, even without Sauron there, starting to kind of like play into his hands unwittingly.
Yeah, and then I'm like wondering, because it says the seeds of Melkor were like took root in men especially, so I'm wondering if this was like something even older that maybe like lasted, even he's not there anymore, it's like it's still going to persist. But
right. And the interesting thing about the Númenorians is they're kind of a classic case of those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. I see that as kind of a theme there as well, because they kind of forget the mistakes that were made in the past by not just men, but elves as well, when it came to the interactions with Morgoth and treachery and
also the eradication of knowledge, because under some of the kings, they ban the use of the elven tongues, right?
Yeah, that was something that happened.
Despite the fact that the elites still obviously know it, because they still carve the king's names in Elvish.
I thought that was funny. It's like, no, you can't speak it, but we're really afraid of violating this one custom, so we're still keep doing it.
Yeah, because for the longest time the kings of Numenor, they would take up Quenya names. All their names would be in Quenya. And then
Yeah, like our guy like that comes back later, I think Tar Palantir, which
yeah,
means
Tar Palantir,
far seeing eye or something like that.
the last good king.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, I agree with you, White Cloaks there. The passing of the torch to the younger generation is a huge theme throughout the lack of passing the torch to the younger generation.
Yeah.
I agree. And I think it kind of like it isn't so much with the elves because I think they do kind of lose sight, but like they have like the curses and the dooms that have been laid upon them. But like with humans, it's like you get the shorter lifespans and you don't have the kind of like I don't know how to say it. It's like a
intergenerational.
Yeah, it's not intergenerational, and they're not as like epic in scope as what they're doing. Like the human stories seem a lot like smaller, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah, good point. So, yeah, so when do we get to Sauron? So Sauron hates Númenor for their relation to the Eldar and the Valar, and so later on it says that he ensnares the Lords of Númenor with rings, and they talk about the ring race, and this is another like kind of.
But remember, Sauron wasn't all bad.
Don't get me started.
I can finish with him.
I gotta point this out every single time Sauron comes up in the stories because like every single time he is vicious, vindictive, malicious, violent, sadistic.
I agree. Like, what? There's no redeeming this guy. Anyone who thinks they could do that is crazy. And I was actually talking to my boyfriend about this, and I'm like, a lot of times I feel like Sauron is almost worse than Melkor. Like the things that Sauron does are just so evil and vindictive because they seem to, because it's almost like when we were talking about the elves and like the Valar and stuff, and they couldn't conceive of certain ideas. Like I think in the first chapter, and they couldn't conceive of somebody being evil. It's almost like Melkor, because he is like a Valar and not like a Maiar or a human or something, or closer to them, like say Sauron is. He doesn't conceive of the evil shit that like Melkor does, and it's just like, oh my goodness, it's pretty bad.
Well, the thing that I draw the line with Sauron insofar as comparing his evil to Morgoth, where I think Sauron is more evil, is when you read about his relationship with Shelob. It's like, yeah, he's definitely way more twisted than Morgoth was.
Like, that bit being, something that's, significantly later on than the stuff going on in here.
Yeah, exactly.
Can point to that and be like, oh, well, he just became corrupted over time and blah, blah, blah. But everything within here is as soon as he embraced Melkor. He like unabashedly evil, unrepentantly evil.
Yeah.
Lady B, did I ever do you know about the whole deal with him and Shelob? Did I ever tell you about that?
I don't think so.
Okay, so
I think I remember reading a bit about it, but go for it.
He considers Shelob to be his pet. And what he would do is he would send his helpless captives to her lair so she could feed. And he would order his servants to report to him in the manner in which she, quote unquote, would play with her food, because it was enjoyable for him to hear it.
Like, I can't imagine many of those people made it back out of there.
None of them did. No. She.
No, I meant like the people even going in there to report.
Yeah. But I mean, like that's the Sauron we're talking about. Like, it's just like I remember reading about that. I'm like, yeah, he's just pure evil. Like, there's nothing redeeming.
Yeah, there's a couple comments I want to read. Like, one from White Cloaks here. Intergenerational strife always seemed an inevitable result when a population loses a generation and 20-year-olds are forced to deal with 60-year-olds, like in World War I. I think that's definitely true. And I think with this,
Yeah.
we have another massive intergenerational, interworld conflict that probably took out a large population. I mean, I think they even talk about the people that were left in Middle Earth. They were like basically in the Dark Ages because they lost so much.
Yeah.
So that is a very good point. And then Eraserhead said Morgoth was originally more powerful and became weaker physically throughout the First Age. Sauron became progressively more twisted and evil throughout the ages.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. And then the other good point with that is that Sauron is very much tied to the physical world, and it talks about him like at the end of this, how I started the show today, how he loses his corporeal form.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting. And
well, it's the same with Morgoth. Morgoth ties himself in his creation of things within Arda.
Mhm.
He pours himself in, like he pours his spiritual essence essentially into the world in order to have power and manifestation over it. And the same thing if you think of the Balrogs, because they are Maiar. They're the same level as Sauron,
I
right?
kind of forget that. Yeah.
But they pour themselves into a physical manifestation of shadow and fire. And so they, unlike the Valar and Maiar and Valinor, who retain their spiritual self and put on bodies like garments, right? But they keep themselves detached and dissociated from the physical world so that they can observe it. But the agents of evil obsess with control and power over the world, and so they pour themselves into it in an effort to subsume it and control it.
Right. Yeah, and it kind of like it weakens them. So like for Morgoth, it like makes him more tied to the physical world, and then like for Sauron, it's like he puts too much into it in the fact that he causes his own destruction, and then he can't keep that form.
Well, it's that recycled theme throughout all of Tolkien's works here is evil is the undoing of itself.
Absolutely. And it's interesting how those two people like kind of go. It's like Morgoth, he's like the creator of all of these things, and then you have like Sauron is the guy that is just doing a bunch of evil things and turning people against each other. So
yeah.
Okay. So Sauron hates them. So he's like, so this is happening, and I kind of forget maybe that. I think I forgot when I was reading this that the timeline of this is so far. So I was thinking, I'm like, okay, there's a lot of time for the whole creation of the ring story, which I haven't read yet. So I won't go through my confusion of that now that you guys explained it. But so Númenorians are starting to, they're kind of wandering away from the light. Like we say in Wheel of Time, they're not walking in the light so much anymore, and they start to neglect the tree. And there's just a few generations where stuff is worse and worse, and there are more people becoming more like tied to the conquest, tied to the power, forgetting where they came from, forgetting why they were even in Númenor for the first part, and then you get a king, a good king, Tar Palantir, with the like far-seeing eye name. And I have to ask, because it's like, does this have any? No, the Palantir stones, right, were created by the Sauron, right?
No, Feanor.
Nope, Feanor. Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay, I had questions about this because they were mentioning it, and I'm like, was this something that I just missed, or like is in something else? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so Tar Palantir becomes a king, and he tries to restore things. He's actually like, he does use the temple of to Iluvatar, and he tries to restore the old ways, but it's really just the corruption is too deep. And he is the guy that has the prophecy that he says, when the tree dies, so does Númenor. And I always wonder, like, does the tree ever truly die, ever?
Well, this tree does.
Yeah, this tree most definitely
this
does.
one tree, yeah, that does.
But the line of the tree does not extinguish within the entire body of Tolkien's work that comes after this.
Oh, that's awesome. I really like that. Like, I don't know. I don't know. I'm really tied to this tree. I have a bunch of houseplants, and it just kind of reminds me of that. And a lot of them are succulent, so it's like, I think I have a hard time in my life, and I've been able to maybe neglected my plants and they don't do so well, but I can make a cutting and I can just start a new plant. So I was thinking in my gardening experience that it's a cool metaphor for that. And
I believe it's Isildur who saves the tree not once but twice.
Yes, we'll get on there. So so at this time when Tar Palantir is king, it's also when the ships stop coming from Avalone. Mm-hmm. So they're totally lost contact with the Eldar.
They stopped coming before.
Yeah.
But they still do not come even though a good king has been instated on the throne. So So effectively the damage has been done, and there's no or at least it would take a long time for the friendship to be fully salvaged between the people of Númenor and the elves and all that stuff.
Yeah, it feels like some kind of a restitution has to be made for that almost to happen. And so, and here's something interesting, and I wrote this down in my notes that, so Tar Palantir has, it's like, Farsight, I think that's their far eyes, that's what his name means, or Farseer, excuse me. And he's always been able to see Avalone, and because it's bright, and it kind of shines like the star, and I think there was Arendelle on his ship too. And but this time they say that Avalone becomes veiled in mist. And this made me immediately think of the Arthurian legends in Avalon, and I started looking up stuff about that. Now, I am not an Arthurian scholar, or I am not good with the Middle Ages at all. So, like, Gadfly, do you have any kind of insights on that?
Well, yeah. There's. I mean, the name is very clearly a direct parallel to that, but the notion of the mists as well obscuring stuff. If you look at like old proper fairy stories, there's so often a mist that a questing knight passes through.
Yeah.
And in passing through that mist, he enters into the realm of fairy.
Yeah, the
and stuff goes on and yada yada yada, and then he comes out and like 100 years have passed in the real world, or whatever, right? But so the idea of the mist is, it's another one of those physical manifestations of separation between the two, but it's also a demonstration of the spiritual separation between the two, and how the realms are so disconnected and dissociated from each other.
Because I was looking it up, and I think they were talking about Avalon being a realm where they took King Arthur when he was mortally wounded, and there were a bunch of women there, powerful. I think they were queens and stuff, and they had healing things, and some said that they healed him and he came back, or he didn't. And the other thing,
the big myth is that Arthur is still there, right? Arthur is still there, waiting for the time when England needs him the most to return. But he's enshrouded in that other world, that other land.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting, because especially what happens to Númenor, and then it also reminded me of the myth of High Brazil. That's a fun rabbit hole. So so that was just, I like finding stuff like that where it's very, very, I thought that was a pretty obvious connection to
once again, that's another one of those things that perfectly demonstrates Tolkien's ambitions within his work of being that cumulative construction of the myth of England.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. He's gone through Beowulf in this already. He's gone through the Roman and Celtic colonization of England. Yeah. So he's gone through the generations of the Celts, the Romans, the Saxons.
Oh yeah, because Beowulf is what's his name? What's this guy? The son starts with a T. I can't think of it. Turambar.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, Beowulf is a lot of things in this.
Yeah, like I was
Yeah.
just thinking of
But-
that because it reminded me of Grendel and stuff. And
Yeah, but
yeah.
but yeah, for sure. And so the Isle of the Blessed of Avalon,
Mhm.
the Misty Isle, where King Arthur awaits the time when England needs him the most to return in glory and triumph. That's part of the myth and culture of England. I mean, like Robin Hood is in this story too, multiple places. But
Yeah.
yeah, so this is just So you noticing that it's not allegory towards it, but it's
It's like a nod. It just, to me, it's
Yeah.
something that shows like Tolkien's absolute depth of knowledge on that, and I think that's awesome. I also think it was cool because it kind of talks about it later in this section, and it says something about like men trying to find it, and they said the path is straight, but it's hidden or something
after
like
the
that.
world gets remade.
It's an illusion, not an allegory. Exactly.
Yeah.
I like that too. Yeah, it's not allegorical.
I have to step
At all.
away for just a couple minutes, guys. I'll be right back.
Oh, sure, that's fine. Yeah, no, take your time. Okay, so
Just one thing for anybody reading this chunk. Think just to keep in your mind, how often does it say that the men looked westward and yearned for what was westward of them? When we get to sort of the end, I'll talk about it a bit and why that's important. But it's just keep in mind as you're reading this, how often that sort of phrase of the men looking westward or having their gaze turned westward or their attention westward,
that is interesting. I wonder what the significance of that is. I mean, other than like, okay, that's where Valinor is and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, that is the significance of the direction, but I'm going to bring it up later, and it's going to blow some people's minds.
Yeah, and so yeah, I'm kind of thinking of it too. I'm like, because that's where the sun rises, right? Like, because it's backwards from Earth, right?
For now.
And yeah, the other thing with Western, I thought it was interesting that they called the Númenorians the Westerness. So it's already like they've been given the sort of honorific of the Western title there too. And I also thought, because hey, I know you're like more of a medievalist, like my degree's in English lit, is that they kept looking westward. So I kept thinking of like early American literature and this sort of like Manifest Destiny stuff, where it was always like westward ho, or like the West is this great new expanded place. And I'm pretty sure that's not a Tolkien thing, but just my interesting like kind of background bringing that in. So
but I guess we probably want to keep going if we're going to finish this chunk, and it's a small chunk.
Okay, sorry. So Tar Palantir dies,
Keep
and
distracting us. So
no, it's okay. I mean, this isn't a huge section. We're already an hour and stuff, but definitely don't want to go too long. But Tar Palantir dies, so this was a good king. And now Tar Palantir's brothers had a son named Pharazôn. And this guy marries
his
Tar Palantir's cousin. Yes, his daughter.
So Pharazôn marries.
I'm sorry, I'm reading. I was like, this is confusing when I wrote it out, and it said so. No, Pharazôn marries his cousin, who was Tar Palantir's daughter, Muriel. And she was actually the heir to the throne. And she did not want to marry this guy. It was against the law. And he just wanted to do it to usurp her crown. And Pharazôn is not a nice guy. He's gone and he's done a lot of conquering. He's very wealthy. And in order to win favor with people, he has distributed his wealth out.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say, like, okay, maybe in that sense is the only way this god-awful show that I don't even want to talk about got right, because he's fat Karl Marx and that. But, like, yeah, Pharazôn.
No, he's better than Karl Marx, because all Karl Marx did was sit around on his ass
Good
This
point.
guy actually went and
He
did stuff.
actually worked. He got the stuff himself.
Nah, they still got him wrong because it all started with the casting. They cast him wrong. They cast him as this old middle-aged man when really during the fall.
Well, we weren't even talking about Rings of Power, but yeah, you're right. They got it.
Yeah, we were trying not to make our homework this one. They took our jobs. Flashbacks. No, we're not doing it.
No.
We're not. Okay.
We'll have a separate. We'll have a grief stream about that where we can just air out everything. Walmart Jack Black, yeah.
Oh
yeah,
okay.
that's
yeah. So yeah, I thought this was really interesting because they just straight up say that like this is evil. I mean, Muriel did not want to marry Pharazôn anyway, and she's his cousin, and it just brings us back to that other story. What was his name?
Maeglin.
Maeglin, right? Maeglin,
Yep.
Is that of Maeglin? Yeah, and his kind of like he's in the curse thing, and
his cousin
he fell in love with his cousin, and she's like, no, I don't love you at all, and that leads almost one of the few things that leads to downfall of that whole city and stuff. So yeah, there's definitely like, there's no kin slaying in the story. There is no kin marriage either, and thank God this is not Game of Thrones. That's all I have to say.
Yeah.
But Pharazôn, yeah. So
you can see how somebody could make a Game of Thrones type story out of this stuff.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
It's
question.
entirely antithetical to the point of what Tolkien's trying to write that stuff. So
yeah, I get that. I know. I'm kind of surprised you don't lean heavier into this stuff, but we're not going there. We'll have a great stream later. Yeah, so Pharazôn decides, so he becomes very powerful, and he had already like got a lot of support through his conquest and stuff, and his role as a ship's captain, and he decides eventually, after he's king, to go to war against Sauron in Middle Earth. And the way I understand it is that he heard that like sort of Sauron was planning on attacking Númenor anyway, or the Númenorian settlements on the west coast of
the thing that really drew his ire was that Sauron was being called the King of Men.
Oh yeah, there's that too.
Yeah. That was the thing. He didn't particularly care too much about Sauron attacking Númenorian colonies. He cared that Sauron was being hailed as a title greater than he
actually
was.
Yeah, he was. It was calling himself King of all men, I think, and Pharazôn, he's just like, no, I'm going to be king of all men. It's like I have this massive wealth, and
strategically, historically, Sauron had always been a problem, and so it was on our Pharazôn's part, it was actually incredibly smart to go and deal with Sauron because you don't want that.
It admits here that he still has wisdom, right?
Yeah.
He is not deceived by Sauron initially.
Yeah.
I think he just has a bunch of hubris, and that's really like what I felt like this story was.
It just takes Sauron time to undo that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's it's because Sauron was the other great power in Middle Earth, right? Like you have the elves still, but they're no longer that sort of.
They're not a powerhouse
power that they were.
Oh, where'd it go?
So the two great powers of Middle Earth at this point in time are the Númenorians and Sauron, and so of course they're going to come into conflict. Ultimately Sauron gives in, but also ultimately wins.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that he goes out and
I gotta go check on my roast again. I'll be right back.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so Pharazôn decides to go to war against Sauron in Middle Earth as like like we just said, and so he brings a bunch of his ships and the army, and they marches for like 7 days, and then he meets him on this like high hill, and
it's one of the more it's probably one of the few, like, to me, humorous parts of the entire story, because Sauron's forces are like, you're on your own, bud. Sorry, we're not dealing with the Númenorians today. This is too much.
I
we're
thought that
leaving
was
you behind. Like,
I know. I thought that was funny because it's like Sauron very quickly realizes like, okay, this dude has way more like ships, way more like soldiers, like better equipment, everything. There's no way I can beat this guy. So he actually, when Farazan calls him to meet him, he actually just goes and he's like, you know what, I want you to like swear fealty and become my vassal. And like Sauron's like, okay, sure, why not? Like hit send, let's go. And that's really funny just because it's kind of like, okay, that's an interesting thing because you just know it's going to end bad. But even Farazan knows initially that's a bad idea. So his idea that he thinks he's going to keep him in check is by taking Sauron back to Númenor. And again, the hubris here is kind of crazy. It's like they just like
I'm really looking forward to this lamb roast. It's gonna be
that's good. You lamb. So good. I love that.
I did pulled pork.
So good.
Slow cooker. Yeah, it was delicious.
I did like a stew last night, and I was very proud of myself because I made it completely from scratch, and I didn't even use a recipe. It was yeah. Now I'm gonna sound like a hobbit now if I keep doing this, and we are definitely not in the age of hobbits. So
not a single short folk in sight.
What was I gonna do? I was gonna say it's all the act of Ar-Pharazôn bringing Sauron to Númenor is very reminiscent of the story of the Trojan horse.
Yes,
well, it's also a mirror of Melkor being unchained and let loose in Valinor.
Oh yeah, totally. Yep. Oh my goodness, yes.
That's very, very true.
Which goes into the like younger generations not learning from their elders.
There are tons of myths and stories of it's the quote unquote wise counselor, right? Yeah. Who the reader or the audience knows is a vile, evil person, but through flattery and deception and saying what the person wants to hear.
Yeah.
The advisor comes in and subverts everything and leads to the decline and death of the hero figure.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, like he does this a lot with like Wormtongue and Theoden and then like even Denethor. It's the sort of different corrupting and the decay too. So
yeah, and the one thing I've always been puzzled about, and I've always had a question about, is the fact of the elves already have this long history with Sauron in the Second Age, and it's not a good one, and a lot of it stems from deception and being fooled by him, and it's interesting to me that because news obviously would have traveled to Elrond and Gil-galad and whoever else about what was going on in Númenor and that they had captured Sauron. I'm kind of surprised that the elves didn't try and intercede and be like, no, you just have to kill this guy now. Like, you have to get rid of him.
The build up to the elves are.
I know the Númenorians and the elves are estranged from one another at this point, like greatly so, but you'd think the elves would still say, hey.
You still have the Ellen Dilly, right? Because they're still talking.
It's also the passage of time and generations, as we pointed out before. The early generations of the Númenorians were people who still had suffered at the hand of Sauron, or whose parents had suffered at the hand of Sauron.
Yeah.
But now we are 24 generations gone.
Yeah.
Good point.
And there's been so much time and so much degradation of the history of the people in favor of the pursuit of wealth and power.
Yeah.
That at this point, I would not be surprised if the elves were thinking the Númenorians have probably formed an alliance with Sauron.
That's fair. That's a fair point.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe they did, because it's like, I mean, at some point, Sauron really ingratiates himself into the court of Farazôn, and he really just wins them over with flattery. Plus, he knows a bunch of stuff that they don't, and so he's teaching people things, and he really like, starts kind of worming his way into everything. So maybe they thought he could actually benefit us and maybe give us an edge against the elves, maybe.
Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons this is one of my favorite chapters is because you get actual Sauron dialogue.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I believe it's the first time you do in the entire book, if I recall correctly. Where he essentially, you get to see how he deceives and corrupts Ar-Pharazôn.
Yeah, I wanted to read something now, and it was like he starts like turning people away from the light and getting them to first in secret, like, we're going to worship Melkor. And he comes up with a very interesting story. And it says, here's some of his dialogue. And like he's talking to Pharazôn about Melkor, and he says, and out of the world was made, for darkness alone is worshipful, and the Lord thereof may yet make other worlds to be gifts to those that serve him, so that the increase of their power shall find no end. And Ar-Pharazôn said, who is the Lord of the darkness? Then behind locked doors Sauron spoke to the king, and he lied, saying, is it he whose name is not now spoken? For the Valar have deceived you concerning him, putting forward the name of Eru, a phantom devised in folly of their hearts, seeking to enchain men in servitude to themselves. For they are the oracle of this Eru, which speaks only what they will. But he, that is their master, shall yet prevail, and he will deliver you from this phantom. And his name is Melkor, Lord of all, giver of freedom, and he shall make you stronger than they.
Yeah.
First instance of Satanists.
Yeah. Really, really and truly. And the interesting thing about that too is Sauron, given he's as old as creation, he's had direct contact with Eru Ilúvatar being one of the Maiar. He knows all this stuff, which because he's such a brilliant kind of strategist and not strategist,
this is sorcerer, really.
Almost he's very political. He's very, very charismatic. And a combination of charisma and knowledge is incredibly dangerous. Especially given how much history Sauron knows, how much he knows about, not divinity, but just the cosmos as a whole. It's he really brings all of his knowledge to full effect by kind of
I love that part, the first part I read when he said, and the Lord thereof may yet make other worlds to be gifts to those that serve him, so the increase of their power shall find no end. So it's like he remembers how things were when they were first made, but he's also using his knowledge of what the Númenorians crave and what Ar-Pharazôn has done to kind of really give him this sort of fake BS view of the world that'll appeal to him, so it'll get him on his side. And it's just sort of
the just bold-faced lies with a veneer of truth that is speaking directly to the desires of the person he's talking to. So because it's what the person wants, they don't question that veneer of truth, and they don't dig any deeper, right? And they just, oh yeah, sure.
It's also playing to their fears, not just their desires, but their fears as well. Knowing full well that they fear death.
Yeah, that is interesting. I was going to that fear of death.
Well, and this is where the high place that they set up to worship Eru Ilúvatar gets supplanted by the
temple
to Melkor, and they cut down the white tree. And they burn it, and they do human sacrifices there.
Yeah, we're sacrificing humans. Yeah, this is going great, guys.
Particularly, they're sacrificing. This is another one of those allusions, where it's you can see the the martyrdom of the Christians in this
Yeah,
type of thing, because
definitely.
they're the true faith, the true believers
They're the ones that
are
were
getting targeted.
sacrificed.
But a lot of times they're not getting technically targeted for being the true believers, or the the elf friends
Yeah, it's
and the
some
faithful ones.
BS like political prosecution kind of a thing.
Yeah, and then the punishment is essentially being sacrificed, which is what the the games in the Colosseum were. They were ritualized combat sacrifices.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially, and I mean, I think this is even more like
But then
closer to
at the same
Christians being
time,
sacrificed.
think of like the Aztecs.
Oh yeah,
My mind went to Carthage.
Yep.
that too.
One of the
but
go ahead, Gadfly. Sorry.
The point I'm just trying to make by pointing to the Aztecs is this is stuff that comes up all over humanity. It's also in the Bible. The people.
I know. I was thinking of
in
like the
Moloch
Temple of
and Baal
Baal
and
and
stuff
like
yeah. So this is Tolkien is demonstrating a truth that is inherent to all of humanity that gets by putting this allusion to the Christian persecutions in here.
Yeah,
he's drawing from that and demonstrating a greater notion of humanity, and
Absolutely.
encapsulating that in his writing.
I think it also kind of shows like that kind of like the peak of a civilization. It's like when they get to the point where they're
Decadence
actually sacrificing. Yeah, the decadent part. Like, I don't know if you've ever read the book The Fourth Turning or something, but it kind of talks about there's these certain like rise and decline of civilization, and you get to the decadent era where they're just like anything goes.
The rise and fall of the Roman Empire, right? Got to such a point of opulence and decadence and depravity.
Hey,
you had your when you really your Neros, your Caligulas, your
Akallabêth.
Yeah, like I would say peak Rome, not to get too off topic, but would probably be Augustus, honestly. But
Augustus would and Tiberius and Claudius would be peak imperial Rome, as in
Imperial
Emperor Rome.
Yeah,
but peak Rome in terms of it being
the Republic,
a somewhat noble institution, would be actually not even before Caesar, because you had Sulla before Caesar, who used to so we were
honestly
a very short period of time before we get to peak Rome being a seemingly good place. But even at that point in time, they still had gladiatorial combat and stuff.
It'd probably be before Hannibal. Honestly, probably.
Well, we got to go back to the Etruscans, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like take it back.
Peak Rome is Etruscan.
So tell us for the record, Gadfly, how many times a day do you think about the Roman Empire?
Well, as I, it's a very difficult thing, because I also have to think about Charlemagne, the Holy Roman Empire, Alfred the Great. I also, of course, have to think about the 1066 and that debacle that happened in England.
Yep.
But then other stuff as well that's equally important, like Alexander the Great and the Hellenistic expansion. So probably only about once every 5 minutes.
I think every single time I hop in my car and I drive, I think about Rome. Literally,
roads.
Because of roads.
All the time, especially when I cook, because I'm Italian and I'm like always very much about like getting my fresh herbs, like bringing that in, and But before we get too off topic, in all of this darkness, there is actually some light, and there are some good people in the faithful. And this is when we learn about a dude named Amandil. And his brother Elendil, and they were both very well-known and prominent ship captains, and they led the groups of the faithful. And Elendil especially had a very brave son named Isildur, and Isildur comes to prominence at this last part because we hear about Sauron wanting to get Pharazôn to cut down the tree Nimloth. And Isildur's like, nah, bro, ain't gonna happen. And so he disguises himself and goes in and steals a fruit from the tree. And in the process of stealing it, he gets shot. But luckily, because he was disguised, nobody figured out who he was. And I think it was nighttime too. And so he just barely makes it back to his dad and his uncle. And they try to nurse him back to health as much as they can. And then they take the fruit and grow a tree from this. And it's kind of interesting because it says as the fruit grows, it's like he's just miraculously healed and is fine. So that's the first cool part of Isildur's story.
Yep. Well, the thing about Isildur, like I said, he saved the tree twice. He saved it that time, and then fast forward to the sacking of Minas Ithil, he saved it again. So him and the tree are very connected. they really
that
are.
Is really interesting because it's like they talk about what is it, Isildur's heir and stuff a lot in Lord of the Rings when they're talking about.
But that's just another example of great world building, setting up the, or I guess in this case, retroactively demonstrating the significant power of Sauron in the Ring.
Yeah,
because Isildur falls to the ring's power. And it's the same Isildur who brazenly went into the temple to save the tree and did all these other great feats, right? So it's like,
well, to interject a little bit, isn't it contested whether canonically in the books Isildur actually felt the temptation of the ring? Because if I recall correctly, he says he's taken it as a weregild for his father's death. His father and his brother, actually.
Yeah, I guess it's not canonically stated that he was tempted by the ring in terms of the books.
Because I know it's how it's portrayed in the movies, but I could have sworn that he took it as almost like a prize of war kind of thing, more or less.
Yeah, but it's a prize of war that is like taking a activated atomic bomb as a prize of war.
Right, that's true. That's
or taking Sauron as a hostage.
Yeah, that's you know what? That's a great like comparison there. It's interesting. Made the same mistake the last king of Númenor did.
Yeah, it's sort of like the hubris, like this thing isn't going to affect me, but it affects everyone.
And it's not even necessarily that it corrupted him. It's just that it survived, and in its surviving, set up the conflict to come.
Yeah.
Right. And in its surviving, it caused Isildur's death.
It did. That is true. Yeah.
Yeah, poor Isildur. But he's still alive now, and luckily he's got something big to do because Pharazôn is growing old, and he's feeling like he's feeling it, and he's like, I'm not going to be here forever. So Sauron convinces him, hey,
I'm not going to be here forever, damn it.
Yeah, he's like, hey, you know what? It'd be a really good idea to go attack the Valar before you die. And yeah, so he's gearing up. They're preparing for war. They're building ships. They're making weapons. And Amandil decides, like, you know what? We have to warn them, and we have to tell the Valar that this isn't all humans that are doing this. We need to warn them too. And so he knows, even though by doing this, he's going to never come back. They'll probably kill him, but he feels like it's his duty. So he takes a ship and sails west.
It's also, as Elendil points out, this will be the first time that the elf friends will actually be betraying the kingdom of Númenor.
Yeah.
And so it's we go through the Silmarillion and we hear all these stories and the importance of oaths and swearing vows and trust and following through with your actions and loyalty and virtue, like all those virtuistic characteristics. And this is the book now saying, hey, actually, is being loyal to evil virtuous?
Yeah.
Loyalty is virtuous, but is there something greater than loyalty at stake here?
Where do you draw the line exactly?
Yeah, that is a good idea. But it's like, yeah, and it kind of reminds me of the voyage of Arendelle. It's like, you're not supposed to step on these shores, but he realized that he had to give them this message. So I think there was probably the intent. And we don't know what happens to him. He's never seen again. I mean, he could be dead. He could have just been allowed to live. Who knows? We don't know. But
neither him nor his 3 trusty servants whom he loved and who loved him greatly.
Yeah.
Which, of course, we know Amazon Prime is going to turn into a polycule.
Oh.
I shouldn't have said that. I've given them ideas. I've put it out into the atmosphere.
Oh, yeah.
I can save him.
I just.
So, but you know what? Before they do that, before they sail, they also tell Elendil and Isildur, or Amandil tells Elendil and Isildur to, you know what, gather up the faithful, and you're gonna have to bug out at some point in time in the near future. So just be ready to leave. And I think they talk about all the stuff they brought with them, and they took the sapling and stuff like that.
Yep.
And so, that eventually happens, and does not stop Alfarazon, and bad things start happening. We get these eagle-shaped clouds approach Númenor. Lightning strikes people. There's earthquakes. There's smoke from Iluvatar's temple. It feels very like Pliny.
It's like there's a lot of plagues going on. Something.
Yeah, it kind of was part of what was it, Exodus and Pliny the who was it, the one that died in Vesuvius?
Pliny the Elder. It was the Elder,
yeah, writing stuff down and all of that craziness. And is that gonna stop him? No, he's gonna hit send on this. And so I'm
planning on attacking the island of Manwë, who controls all the birds in the air. All these birds are coming in and shooting lightning at us like they're freaking Zapdos from Pokemon.
Right.
Yeah, I know. And it's no, it's you know what? He even warns them. I think Manwë was being especially nice here. It's we're not sending the eagles. We'll send you the cloud-shaped eagles. We will strike people down. But is it stopping this guy? Nah. He's just going to keep going. Pharazon.
I just imagine Pharazon side-eyeing Sauron are you sure this is a good idea? Are you sure we should be doing
Tolkien uses the phrase, Pharazon hardened his heart.
Yep.
Which is the exact phrase that's used in the Exodus story, where Pharaoh hardened his heart.
Yeah,
right. And it's also used elsewhere in the Old Testament. But it's that idea where the person sees what's going on, knows what's going on, knows the consequences of it and the outcomes of it, and says, "Fuck it, I don't care."
Yeah.
Yep. It's when Maedhros 2 and Maglor, they're just they see the Silmarillion. It's it's been bothering us all of these. Everyone's gonna we're gonna take it, we're gonna kill people, we're gonna do a lot of bad things, but we have to do it because we just started this a million years ago. And yeah, it kind of felt it's not the kind of doom that the elves had for the kinslaying and stuff like that, but it definitely felt like a different kind of doom, more this is the you made your bed, now you have to lie in it kind of thing. So he just goes. He decides, you know what? I don't care that all this is happening. We're sailing. And so they sailed towards the west. And there's tons and tons of ships. Everything is going at this. And
they actually make it.
They do make it. I thought this part was really interesting. It's he reaches Valinor.
It's
he finds it empty.
They were given so many opportunities up until they set foot on the land. So it's almost as if they had turned around at that very point, things would have been forgiven, if not forgotten.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like something, it's like you had a choice. It's like it kind of emphasizes, and I know I talked about this in the beginning about whether or not there was free will. It's like it's a situation like this that emphasizes that, yeah, you have a choice. You could either do this way or that way.
Yeah.
And
we're telling you which way to go. You know that's what we're saying, but you are ignoring us.
You know what I kind of find interesting about this, though, is that the Valar opt to leave everything to Eru Ilúvatar insofar as dealing with this. When they didn't do that with the elves some 2,000 years prior, after the kinslaying, the Valar took it upon themselves to cast down judgments and act on their own. And I find it I'm curious as to why that is, because you also
have to remember that Feanor made that oath on the name of Eru Ilúvatar.
True.
Right. So they, at that point, the Valar had to be like, all right, well, I guess you are going to find out, but you're not going to do it here.
Well, what I'm saying is that why I'm kind of surprised, given that the elves are the firstborn. He did make that oath to Eru. Why they didn't hand over the reins to Eru after the kinslaying, like, hey, here, go ahead, deal with it as you see fit, in the same manner that they did with the Númenorians.
That's interesting. That is kind of interesting, because I think, like, didn't it talk about how
the reason for Eru's involvement in this is to ultimately take away the temptation from mankind again forevermore to come to Valinor.
That's true.
But in order to do that, they had to reshape the world. And so they were like, all right, well, this is remember, because the other thing is the before the Valar entered Arda, they knew the full plan, full scope of what was going to happen, except the very end. When they came into Valar, into Arda, they no longer had all of that foreknowledge.
True. Yeah, that was my thinking on that, because it said that, like, they the Valar, like, knew, like, the fate of the elves and stuff like that, and that they knew that they would have an age and then men would come, but nobody seemed to know anything about men except Ilúvatar, and that, like, they don't know the fate of them or anything like that. And
the other thing to consider in the difference is the difference between the ends of the elves and the men, right?
Yeah.
The elves are tied to Arda, or the elves' souls and spirits are tied to Arda. Men's are not.
Yeah.
So the Valar don't know what
they can't say
fate befalls men after they die.
True.
Eru Ilúvatar does. And so in this instance, yes, they could kill all the men, but they don't know what that ultimate end is for their souls. In terms of
it's almost like
they left it up to him to determine what was going on.
True.
Yeah, it's like the men are the kind of purview of Ilúvatar, so they're his to punish. Versus, like, the Eldar were always, like, involved with the Valar and stuff. So kind of interesting to see.
So I do see the questioning in that aspect of it, but
the other thing too, I would argue, would be the severity of their crimes. Obviously, what Feanor did was terrible, but in comparison to what the Númenorians were doing, it's
well, the Númenorians, their crime is more high spiritual level.
Like, it's blasphemy, straight up.
It's pretty blasphemous. It's the reason why there's, the, what do you call it? I forget the term, but there's a certain segment of scientific domain right now is trying to come up with the conclusion or the desire for everlasting life for mankind,
Right.
and they're trying post-humanism or stuff like that.
Transhumanist stuff, like to
Transhumanist,
try to
yeah.
like
So they're trying to supplant themselves at the top of the religious hierarchy. Essentially, they're presenting mankind as being gods themselves, and that's what's going on here in this story. Is Farazan wants to be the god of Middle Earth. And it's another similar callback, a biblical callback to the Tower of Babel. Is that sort of pride? Well, we're going to build a tower so that we have more power than God, so God will never flood the earth, and we cannot be destroyed by that because we can just go up in our tower, and then we can be gods everywhere.
Right.
And then Nebuchadnezzar as well.
Yeah.
And so it's that high crime of ultimate blasphemy of trying to supplant the position of God / Eru Iluvatar with oneself.
Yeah. I also thought it was interesting when they talk about like how I don't remember if it's like he finds out when you get there or like he hears it before he leaves, but when they tell Farazan, it's like, okay, you could physically go there, but like when you go there, you're not going to get immortality. It's just going to like age you that much faster. Kind of like reminds me of like Melian and Baron and Luthien and that kind of thing.
Luthien,
like
when she had the Nauglamir with the Silmaril, it hastened her mortality.
Yep.
Like it's just so it's the sort of the like awful like insert like it's in terms of like things that are like super holy or powerful in the spiritual realm. It's like awful in like awe, like there's awe in it too, but it's awful in that it'll hurt you and stuff like that. That's a good point. Maybe it's like the difference between blaspheming against God and blaspheming against the Holy Spirit. That's a good point. So so we find it empty and like there's just nobody there, and then Manwë and Iluvatar decide to wreak havoc on Farazan and pretty much destroy everything. At least like there's they call down the heavens, rocks are falling, there's volcanic eruptions, the sea is like swallowing up Númenor, everything is kind of falling apart, and it's almost as bad as like the
the one line here, but our Farazan, the king, and the mortal warriors that had set foot upon the land of Aman were buried under falling hills. There it is said they lie imprisoned in the caves of the forgotten until the last battle and the day of doom.
Yeah, you know what was really interesting in this? Going back to how they talk about their like that line, they're imprisoned in the caves of the forgotten until the last battle and the day of doom. Plus how they talk about Sauron becoming a black wind. It was just like, oh, Wheel of Time throwbacks. Oh, that's cool. I like that part. When you just
I mean, even the Land of Promise is called Andor, right? So
yeah, it's Andor too. We had Andor. Like, that was really fun. I like seeing stuff like that, and it's interesting because, of course, in Wheel of Time you have Machin Shin, which is like all of the evilness. I mean, you could say it's probably what Sauron would be like, incorporeal Sauron. But yeah. So
now, I just want to say, Sauron during all this while this is going on. Or there's something we forgot to mention. So with the lightning and everything going on, if I recall correctly, he goes up to the top of the temple and stands there in defiance
of it,
of the lightning, and then the already corrupted men of
Númenor
they start worshiping him as a god.
Yeah.
So sorry, Farazan, dude. Sauron got your people,
but Sauron only has some people worshiping as a god for a very short period of time because
because he falls victim to his own hubris, and of course his mortal form cannot like withstand the onslaught of the ocean and Iluvatar's anger and stuff like that. So he's on Númenor and he gets destroyed in his temple and by Sauron. And has to go back to, and he goes back to Middle Earth and he goes back to Mordor. And this is like one of those things where Tolkien doesn't give a lot of explanation of what's going on. He just says that he can't take his, I think, fair form again. So I'm just assuming he can't be like a person. And he talks about how he becomes this like eye or something like that.
Well, he becomes a lord who's dark and terrible and feared. And that's how he's always seen. From that point forward.
Because he's a Maiar, right? So so he can put on that flesh coat, essentially. But he can no longer put on the guise of the charming, charismatic, deceitful individual. He now has to put on the tyrant. Guys.
Yeah, it says that it was robbed now of that shape in which he had wrought so great and evil, so that he could never again appear fair to the eyes of men. So it's like it's a curse. Like you're always going to be something awful and horrible to look at. So
yes, she was at the beginning, but she was not one of the ones that survived.
No, she tried to go to the temple as things were being destroyed, but it was just too late.
She went too late is the quote, which I always interpreted as, she should have been going as her duty as queen throughout the entirety of what was supposed to be her reign.
It kind of like that one particular part just reminded me of like Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot's wife, like looking when they said
the pillar of salt.
It also states that when things were getting really bad for the faithful, a lot of them turned away in fear. So a lot of them stopped doing the faithful activities out of fear of being persecuted because they were being sacrificed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is true. It's like he splits into sorts. So what is interesting about this, and I know we've mentioned it a few times before, is that we had flat Arda for a really, really long time. And it was just like, you could go one place to the other and there was an end of the world. And now because of this, Arda becomes a globe.
Yep.
And I think the reason for this is that they wanted to hide Valinor and Erisea from ever being reached by people again. So it's still there, but it's like, here's your globe and you just have to keep going straight. And I thought that was interesting. And I mentioned this earlier about how they talk about there's like a straight line to it. I want to find it. It says, thus in after days, what by the voyages of ships, what by lore and starcraft, the kings of men knew that the world was indeed made round, and yet the Eldar were permitted still to depart and to come to the ancient west and to Avalone, if they would. Therefore, the lore masters of men said that a straight road must still be for those that were permitted to find it. And I just thought that was interesting because there's the idea of like, if you have the right purpose and you're good of heart, that bad things won't befall you. Like when Beren finds the Silmaril or gets the Silmaril, and like when like Sam has the ring and stuff like that. It's interesting, and it's very like it's one of the parts in this like section that I like because it's epic language from the like long literary tradition. Okay. So. How do you guys feel about like, we're around Arda now?
It's one of those fascinating and interesting theological constructions of the history of the world that Tolkien creates, right? Like, it's an explanation for how things are. And it's a perfectly coherent self it's coherent within itself in how it explains things, right?
Yeah.
Self-sufficient argument, I think I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I like how it was like, okay, the world was round because we had to make it round because there were places that like men couldn't go to. Like we had to change the geography because there were places that were so special and holy that people just living on like Arda couldn't go to it. Like I like that I like that explanation. There's just something poetic about it, and that because I think it really taps on the mythical thing of the places like Avalon, Hybrasil, the sort of if you're pure of heart, like you can still go there because obviously men know that people go there still to the Valinor and like the elves and stuff like that. So
Right.
I like that.
I often wonder though, because in the first age when the Noldor depart from Middle Earth, or Beleriand, I guess at that point, I often wonder, like, I think to myself, so even after the world was made round, are the elves still free to come and go as they please? Because the Valar said you're free to depart, you're free to go back anytime you want.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously, at the end of the War of Wrath, they were very like all the elves need to come back. So I wonder if that dispensation was still there,
Right?
Because it doesn't like Galadriel at the end of Lord of the Rings say that like if you go there you can't come back, or she just hadn't returned because she had to avoid the temptation of the ring.
Well, she felt like she still had purpose in Middle Earth, which is why she stuck around after the fall of Morgoth. But which she did. But I think about that every once in a while. It's like, okay, so after the world was made round, and the elves still have a direct line to Valinor if they so choose to go back.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if it works the opposite way as well.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'm not sure there's an answer to that because
I don't think there is. Yeah. But
yeah, so and that's how the Akallabêth ends. And oh look, Jaden's here. Hey Jaden, how you doing? Hope that you're on Christmas break by now and all that good stuff and you're having a good time. So yeah, so you guys have any other thoughts on Númenor? I mean, I guess my big thing here is that there's a lot more Númenor stuff that I guess is in other stories that I haven't read. I mean, obviously I need to read the last part, the Rings of Power. There's going to be stuff that I won't get that I think was alluded to in this story, and then there's like the Unfinished Tales and Legendarium stuff too. So
there's also the Fall of Númenor proper. It's a part of the compendium of the legendary stories of Middle Earth, and it's the last one that came out, I believe. Which it's pretty much just the story that we've already read, but in just greater depth.
Yeah,
more details.
Yeah, that's cool. I'd like to read that. I mean, now I've kind of got stuck on the obscure token stuff, but
right.
Do you have any thoughts, Gadfly?
I'm just going to read a chunk of the end here. Among the exiles, many believed that the summit of Meneltarma, the pillar of heaven, was not drowned forever, but rose again above the waves, a lonely island lost in the great waters. For it had been a hallowed place, and even in the days of Sauron none had defiled it. And some there were of the seed of Eärendil that afterwards sought for it, because it was said among lore masters that the far-sighted men of old could see from the Meneltarma a glimmer of the deathless land. For even after the ruin, the hearts of the Dunedain were still set westward, and though they knew indeed that the world was changed, they said, Avalone is vanished from the earth, and the land of Aman is taken away, and in the world of this present darkness they cannot be found. Yet once they were, and therefore they still are, in true being and in the whole shape of the world as it first was devised. And I'm trying to find the exact line. But within the Lord of the Rings, when Frodo and Sam are captured by Faramir, there is a moment that Tolkien highlights, saying, "All the men stood silent and gazed westward." And this is just in the middle of a chunk, out of nowhere. They just stop, they look, they gaze westward. And of course, their thoughts and their minds are on the Valar.
Yep.
And the place of worship of Eru Ilúvatar. So
That's crazy.
within the Lord of the Rings, if you know the whole construction of Tolkien's world, you know that in the Lord of the Rings there is a moment where men are praying to Eru Ilúvatar without Tolkien ever having to actually say that.
Being explicit. Yeah.
That's cool. Oh, that's so cool. That is really cool. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I guess it's sort of a metaphor for like all of the hallowed and sacred land in the West. That is really crazy.
Well, these are the faithful, right? They're the ones who long for the time of the good kings and the rule of the good kings and the time when they worship together with the elves, and spoke with the Valar and all that stuff. So anyone who says that Tolkien's work is not religious.
Oh yeah. It's also, that's another, it's in a different context, but it's something Tolkien did also with the island of Tol Morwen, where Morwen and Turin are buried.
Yeah.
Because that island still exists in the West.
Yes, it does. That's true.
It was never destroyed, even though Beleriand was flooded. And to get geographical, I have the map around here somewhere, but I can't remember whether it is the furthest most island or if it's Meneltarma.
Ooh, I have no idea.
Meneltarma is not even certain if it continues to exist as an island. It's just they have that hope and that desire that Meneltarma.
You guys look at my book.
Yeah,
I need a new book.
Again, well, I grabbed it. The Atlas of Middle Earth. Need to go to my Third Age map, like the big one. So I could have sworn it was confirmed whether or not it actually was there. I could have that wrong, though. I entirely could have that wrong. Let me see here.
I do like the idea that like they remove like Valinor and Erisea and instead, but they still leave that island that was the shrine. And it's just like it's like that one point of hope that's there for men still.
Right.
But it's still accessible, like something is still there.
Yeah,
that is pretty cool.
The hope and the longing for the restitution of that relationship, right?
Yeah, exactly. The sort of like it's hope, or like the hope for grace and forgiveness.
Yeah. Because if anything is a theme throughout Tolkien's works, it's hope.
That's why we love Tolkien. Did you find it, Feanor?
Yeah, according to the Atlas of Middle Earth by Karen Fonstad, in conjunction with Christopher Tolkien, Meneltarma on the map is there in an area called Atalante, which means the Downfallen.
Hey, was that not another name of Atlantis?
Yeah.
Yeah. Atalante.
Yep. And measuring it in terms of miles, it's about 1,500 to 2,000 miles away from the Bay of Belfalas and Dol Amroth. So west of there. So
West.
According to the Atlas of Middle Earth by Karen Fonstad, however reliable you want to see that. But No, okay,
No,
stop.
no,
Stop
no,
it.
Will, no,
Except
no,
very
no,
small
no,
rocks.
no. We'll save that for later.
No,
Oh.
we just got to make fun of it, like
we have to.
in Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Oh,
What
that's
else
cool.
floats? Ducks.
That's a good one. It just occurred to me from Maximus Majoranus here. It just occurred to me that the Manetheren might be Tolkien's an analog of the Western Wall, the last remains of a sacred place. That's awesome.
Yeah, I can see
good
that.
point.
Whether people can actually get there or not is a different question.
Right.
Yeah, that is cool. That's cool thing to think about.
Talking about Akallabêth just makes I've had like 6 of it because I post on Twitter all the time, X, whatever you want to call it, about all the different things that terrible show got wrong. And I've just been reminded of like 5 other things that I didn't even think about. Like
when such big things are so horribly wrong.
Yeah.
It's so easy to focus on those things that you don't realize the medium-sized things that they got wrong,
right?
Or the small-sized things that you got wrong, even.
Well, I was thinking more about our Pharazôn.
Yeah, they really kind of did him a disservice.
They botched him. Well, no disrespect to the actor, terribly miscast.
Well, I mean, pretty much everybody.
Can we talk about Muriel too?
It's all pain.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna plan on having. I think of doing a post Christmas just Tolkien chill stream. That I have some other Tolkien friends that haven't been on here with book club, but I would like to talk to them too, and just you can talk about anything Tolkien. We can rag on the show and stuff because I think the thing that's got me, having read Wheel of Time, having read some of the Witcher books, and having read Lord of the Rings and Silmarillion now, is the absolute butchery of thematic elements, and that just gets me all sorts of riled up. But
even just the interactions between men and elves in that Rings of Power show is so horribly wrong because they present the elves as if they're like colonizers.
Yeah, they have a penal colony.
The elves were in such a state of low power that they had
the elves
to their own realms.
Is like the elves, and I'm just gonna try to make this like topical to the discussion we're having, else I'm just going to go on a tangent for hours. But what I really saw, especially in these 2 different stories, is just how like the conception of what Tolkien's conception of elves were, is that they're creatures, they're like angels, they're at a higher like moral level than men. And I think with this story really saw that there, with like the men are so corruptible to such like almost petty things. They're just like vices, like pride. They're very like they want power.
The way I like to describe elves is that they are extra natural.
That's a great word.
They're so infused in the natural world that they have senses and capabilities and understanding of the world around them that humans cannot grasp.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's really cool. So we'll definitely have a chill stream, and I know it's coming close to 2 hours, and I have a D&D game starting in like 30 minutes, so I want to wrap this up. So do you guys have anything coming up this week?
No, I don't have anything coming up this week.
Yeah, just Christmas, right? Okay, cool.
Yeah, just Christmas and finally being done with the holidays. Good grief.
Yeah, I have quite a big like Christmas thing coming up. I'm gonna meet my boyfriend's family, and that's gonna be really interesting. And I think I also have I'm helping the White Cloaks put together like a Christmas like subscriber like thank you kind of stream too, chill stream. It's gonna mostly like I'll probably be putting it together because my boyfriend Will he has to work, and then Pips is back, but Pips is off having a baby, so he probably won't be with us at all. But hopefully we can come in and say hi.
He's not gonna live stream the event.
I know, right? I'm like, come on, dude, we gotta build an army here. But we'll try to have it like I know if you're a White Cloaks person and you're on our like YouTube subscriber thing, I put out a call if you want to be on the stream. So let me know if you guys are interested in that on our Discord. And then I think if I can, I was going to try to make an actual produced video for this, but Tolkien wrote this really amazing book. He didn't write a book. It was he did something with his kids where he would write them letters as Santa, and it was collected in a book that's called The Father Christmas Letters. And I bought this in the summer, and I read it, and I just thought it was one of the coolest things. I don't think a lot of people know about it, but it's so cool to see how like he has such a great imagination. There's beautiful illustrations, and you can really see how his like
he was such a good dad.
Yeah, right. He really was.
Like, considering he had no father growing up, it's like one of those things where you understand why he went the extra mile with everything.
Too. I love how you can see his imagination develop, and as the kids grow up too, how the kind of letters change, and then you can see like how he had this really close relationship with Christopher, and he's Christopher's the oldest, right? I think.
Yeah.
Or he's one of the older kids, but as like you can tell the other kids don't like still take it seriously. It's like he's still writing back to Father Christmas, and it's really sweet. I wanted to do a whole produced video about it, but that just takes too much time. So I have a couple of webcams. I might just like do a stream, and I'm like, just show you the book. I'll read some of the things from them because they're really awesome. So.
Oh, I did actually remember one thing that I do have going on. It's going to be later on this week on the 23rd. I don't know if I'm going to be doing it vlog style or if I'm just going to be uploading just pictures of it. But I am going to be heading to, as of yet, unannounced locations and taking pictures of where I'm going to be doing my short web series at.
Awesome.
Just to give people kind of an idea of where the web series is going to be taking place without spoilers. So... That'll be happening. Awesome. That'll be happening this weekend.
Oh, that is so awesome. So thank you guys all for coming out. I am going to I did not load up my like outro. Let me see if I can load up my outro for this like really fast just so I can play us out with this. It's just a very short thing. I can't believe I didn't do that. But I hope everyone has a wonderful Christmas and is processing, and we can blame this on Boomer Balefire. That is totally fine. But here we go, and I'd like to thank everyone for coming out again, and I'm just going to play us out and have a wonderful Christmas, and we'll see you in the new year.
Mm-hmm.